Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Thursday, May 22nd, 2025 at 10:50 in the morning. So we're back now to have our final discussions on 122. I think one thing we haven't heard much about yet is the Vermont Ireland Trade Commission. So we have Representative Casey with us to kind of chat with us about proposition that's before us. So Representative Casey, thank you for joining us this morning.
All right, thanks so much for having me, folks. And I do have Representative Molly Burke here in case she wants to chime in. She did come to Ireland a couple of years ago with the caucus trip we did. So I'll get right into it. And I know you've probably gone over the mechanics of the language with Rick quite a bit, so I'll focus more on the why than the, yeah.
Perfect.
So just a few quick slides. The purpose of the Vermont Irish Trade Commission to foster support, expand economic, educational, cultural ties between the state of Vermont and the island of Ireland. I say the island because we would include the north in that. And drawing on successful models from other Irish state trade commissions, of which almost 30 have passed at this point. We'll get into that. Its core goals could include, and your language gives some flexibility for that, but primarily economic development, trade, cultural, educational exchange, government and policy collaboration, and tourism and diaspora engagement. I go into a bit of the history here. Probably in school, all of us learned about the Irish famine there. It wasn't a famine. It was a form of genocide. Ireland was producing more food than they could eat, and it was being shipped over to the rest of the British Empire. Ireland at the time had 8 million residents on the island. That was cut in half after the famine through deaths and emigration to other countries. So even now, Ireland has just climbed up to just about 6 million island-wide there. So we haven't reached the 8 million of the famine, but it was a time of mass emigration, and Vermont was no exception. In 1860s, I think was the report, there were 10,000 Irish-born immigrants who had settled in Vermont. They settled in the population centers, Barrie, Rutland, Burlington, of course, and were really some of the hands that built Vermont at that time, working in railroads, mills, logging, and quarries. So you still see a lot of Irish names if you go to those old cemeteries around Barrie and in the granite there. Still Irish after all these years. Today, Ireland, we have 17% of Vermont residents claim Irish ancestry, which makes us the fourth most Irish state in the entire country here. So we're still going pretty strong here. I love this comparison because the state of Vermont and the country of Ireland have had a direct role in shaping each other. Every day you'll pass by an image downstairs of Matthew Lyon, who was a colorful character, won election from prison there and had a bit of a brawl on the floor of Congress, as we all know there. A Vermont founder who was born in Dublin. I love the contrast of, fast forward to 1998. We have our own Senator Patrick Leahy, who was one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, which really brought peace and prosperity to Ireland, which we've enjoyed since. So if you say the name of like St. Patrick over in Ireland, everybody knows who Patrick Leahy is. He's celebrated. He's celebrated. Last year, it was great to have Senator Mark Daly, who's the Cathaoirleach of the Seanad Éireann, that's the chair of the Irish Senate, come visit us all in the House here. And he addressed the full body there, had some meetings with folks, and testified in support of the Vermont Irish Trade Commission. It's a national movement. As I mentioned, nearly 30 states have passed the Trade Commission, including pretty much all of our neighbors. We're the only state in New England who hasn't passed the Trade Commission at this point. Our neighbors in New York have as well. And that's growing. I think we'll have probably well more than 30 by the time the legislative sessions wrap up for the summer here. So why Ireland? And it is timely. If you've looked at Brexit, Ireland is now the only English-speaking country fully inside the European Union. So whereas a lot of our commerce would have gone through the UK previously, now Ireland is the gateway to Europe there, providing access to 450 million consumers within the EU. There's business-friendly policies, highly educated, tech-savvy workforce, shared values, entrepreneurship, democracy, and sustainability. If you go to Dublin, we have Google's world headquarters is focused in Dublin. And I thought it was interesting, most of Disney animation would be made over in Ireland. So if you watched The Little Mermaid, that was done in Ireland. Yeah. It's a natural partner for Vermont. We share rural innovation economy, emphasizing clean energy, agriculture, and small business development. Ireland's really been a lead on some of the clean energy initiatives there. And of course, there's significant Irish American heritage within our state. So the Trade Commission would help match Vermont companies with Irish partners, investors, and EU networks, and that would be a two-way street going back and forth here. We've had some connections of our own in the State House here with the Irish American Caucus. All legislators, you probably saw my email earlier in the year, are invited over to Ireland. You have to pay for yourself, of course. But you would get the opportunity to meet some of the heads of state there. I think the Minister of Trade met with folks last year. And you'd also go up to the north to hear from political parties such as DUP and Sinn Féin, whose families had killed each other, right? And now they're in a shared government. So if you look at the reconciliation there, I think that's also a tremendous benefit that we can all hear from. So we've seen a lot of reps there. We have our first Republican coming over this summer with, I describe her as the sister I never wanted, Gina Galfetti here across the hall. So we're all excited to get over there and learn more this year. Been working on this for 3 years. It's enjoyed broad support. If you were a member of the last biennium, you saw the bill 667, 25 tripartisan co-sponsors passed out of the House on a voice vote about a year ago there. Lately, the bill you're working with, S-122, passed the full Senate a couple of weeks ago. And as you saw from the drafting of the commission, it would be housed in the Treasurer's office. So Treasurer Pitek is excited about this. He did ask for a seat on the committee, which is only reasonable. But that would be a natural place for the commission to be housed. I don't want to blab too long. I know you have another appointment here at 10:20. But I do want to emphasize that it's completely tied, I believe, the peace process and the economic agreements and ties between Ireland and the United States. And without getting too sappy here, I grew up in the 80s in Ireland on the border in a very turbulent time. I saw my father beaten up by British soldiers. We had the customs station blown up down the road. There was always a British military presence. And I remember, it's part of the reason I got into politics was when I went back and I saw there were no British barracks anymore. People weren't being harassed at the border. I remember being a kid and a soldier would stick a gun in your ribs. So you're part of an IRA youth group or something. And it was all gone. And it was all gone because politics did something in that case, right? We can get cynical about it, but it took the gun out of Irish politics. And that's because of the relationship the US and Ireland has had and the intervention of American politicians coming over. So you cannot separate the economics from the peace and, finishing the troubles and the thousands of people who have died. It's a great credit to America and our intervention internationally. So this is part, if our state could have a small part of the grassroots effort to keep that peace agreement going, because after Brexit, we can't return to those hard borders. And, it still does get very tense sometimes in the north here. So having those US ties are incredibly important. So, Gurama Agav, that's Irish for thank you very much, everybody. A couple more things I'd throw in, you'd want to give the commission some autonomy, I think, to do what they want to do. But, you could certainly look at sending delegations over to look at the Google headquarters. I think a lot of it's done over by Zoom, just looking at the other trade commissions. Often you would bring groups of maybe children from Belfast who grew up on opposite sides of the peace wall to come teach reconciliation in our own classrooms. And I think we've had some trips like that. I'll say with the Governor's Institute that comes over, we had 5 Irish kids. One of them is my intern now. He's graduating today, or he was going to testify himself, but a lovely chap called Ryan Coughlin from County Cork. So to me, that was almost a microcosm of the relationship working already there. So as it's evolved, I don't know why the Senate put money in the appropriations bill, never asked for money. This was debated quite a bit last session. The commission would have the ability to raise money. but it wouldn't be the primary focus. And hopefully it would be, bringing a lecturer over to UVM, again, sending some folks over, but it's not like junkets or anything. And that's not what's happened in other states. So I would just close saying that, I think Ireland has reached out a hand. This is the form of diplomacy and economic development they're working on nationwide. I'd be remiss in saying it's a little frosty at the national level now. Usually the Taoiseach or president are invited to the White House on St. Patrick's Day. MMA fighter Conor McGregor was the ambassador for Ireland to St. Patrick's Day, which we wouldn't say represents the best of us, So, these commissions are important. I think it's great mutual benefit between Vermont and Ireland. So I'd appreciate your support in keeping it in. And I didn't know, we have Kate as well, a couple of people who've been on the trip, so if they had anything to chime in on that.
I don't want to take time. I could just say a couple of words.
Kate,
Representative Molly Burke, Brattleboro, thank you very much for having me here. Can't sort of improve on what Connor just said. And of course, you can imagine a trip with Connor is quite wonderful. I had been to Ireland several times before we went on this trip. I have some family there. Being there as a state representative, as a representative of Vermont was so exciting. We were just treated so beautifully. We had to pay for our own hotel and plane fare, but everything else was taken care of. We had bus trips to the north. We heard the different members of the parliament that wasn't meeting at that time, but heard about sort of their conflicts. We went to the Irish Parliament, and everywhere we went, this is the thing that struck me. People said, "We are so grateful to the United States." So many people said that. I mean, I was just like, whoa, I didn't really understand that, how much appreciation there was. So I just think this is a really fabulous idea. Of course, having this back and forth, having people back and forth, culturally, economically, I think the rural economic development could be a very interesting combination. So thank you very much. And that's all I have to say.
Happy to answer any questions, of course. It's no Molly seat.
Just one quick thing. Sure.
Oh, do you want me up there? Yeah, okay.
Whoever wants to be in the hot seat. Hey, you want to add something?
Yeah, happy to add from the Kate Nugent, representative from South Burlington. I as a student of international relations, I think anything that we can do to foster economic connections is really helpful in maintaining peace and prosperity. So from that angle, I really appreciate the possibility here.
How is this different from the sister state program that's currently in development?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I haven't followed the sister state program too closely there. I don't know if they could be, I don't know if they couldn't both exist in a way. What I do know is this is the model that the Irish government has proposed to work with us, and it appears to be a successful model in other states there. So I just wouldn't want to interrupt the momentum, and I think there would definitely be, in Montpelier, we worked on sister city programs trying to develop partnerships with other states. And, I think it absolutely has its place. This is very distinct, I think, with the peace process going on and the shared history that Ireland and Vermont have. So I'm happy to look more at the sister state program, but I really think we should, hopefully move this forward as well.
They have the same goals. They have it's the same desire. It's the same principles, and it's setting up a program for the state of Vermont so that we can choose partners worldwide in a format that is consistent. And so for me, that feels like good governance, and it feels like setting up one-offs with different groups because that group wants it. Doesn't feel like good governance. And so that's my perspective.
Okay, thank you.
John?
This is a little bit like Representative Graney's question. You mentioned how there are about 30 or so existing arrangements or relationships with other states. and this is sort of the government of Ireland sort of approach, is it then like an out of the box thing, or like do they provide a lot of the structure on what it's about and it's tailored to each individual state? Are the four broad goals that you listed the four broad goals of every state's commission that has one with the state of the nation? What input does the state of Vermont have on what that relationship?
Oh, it's a great question. Yeah, because if you look at it, Ireland's about the size of West Virginia, right? So dealing with the entire nation of America is a bit of a horse of a different color than dealing with states individually. For example, like the New Jersey Ireland Trade Commission, it's more of an industrial base, factories. Other states might have more a technological bent. Vermont might have more of an agriculture bent. So you would really shape it in a distinct way with the state. So it's not a cookie cutter approach across, but you would still have the same format with appointees, and it looks a little different state to state too, with how many are on there. I want to say like New Jersey might have like 30 people on it, which doesn't seem like it's the right size for Vermont, frankly. But who knows? It could grow. And it's the cultural piece is big too. We have the Burlington Irish Heritage Festival is a big supporter of this legislation. So they would love to have an appointee from them on there. We have thousands of visitors to Burlington every year for that festival.
So I'm just sort of trying to understand the overall mechanics of this trade organization. In terms of, it seems like the big purpose is so there's a committee, and then also so you can raise money and have a fund to help fund things. So, okay. And so can you give examples of, but specifically it's focused on trade, but then it's also focused on all these other things. So
let me give you an example. A few months ago in Georgia, Vermont, baby formula company, Irish owned, moved their operation to Wisconsin, bringing 400 jobs with them. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have had an entity who would have intervened there and maybe be a liaison with the executive legislative branch to see what can we do to keep them there? It was an Irish company there. So that might be an example. But again, I think would give them some autonomy to brainstorm, what are the goals Vermont wants to achieve with Ireland? Is it more academic, shaping programs like CCV sends trips over, fostering some of those relationships? Is it tech with like Google and some of the big giants over there? So, I don't want to be on the commission, first of all, but I think we could get some very smart people in those seats who have a connection to Ireland and are appointed by the different entities.
thank you.
Is there anything stopping a nonprofit from being formed to do this? This is, the way it's written here, there are no clear goals, maybe by design, right? It feels half-baked. Truly, like this, the goals on your slide were clearer than the goals in the law. Not a fan of law like that, just to be clear. But what's to stop a nonprofit from forming if this is not going to be a true government entity to do the same thing?
I think there's a bit of gravitas when you have an entity that's appointed by the governor, the Speaker of the House, the head of the Senate. I think they speak with a voice that's louder and probably more representative of the state of Vermont than a nonprofit could be.
Did you ever hear that?
Well, I just wanted to say that as a longtime resident of Little Island Road in Starksboro, where I have friends and neighbors with many cases.
Oh, geez, I apologize.
I appreciate the really long-standing connections between Ireland and at least my neck of the woods.
Great.
If it was possible to, well, I guess you're testing it out as far as the sister state kind of framework, but does that feel like it would be a workable thing?
I need to learn more about the sister state, like to me, the government of Ireland is approaching us and extending a hand and saying, we want to work with you. And this is how it's going. It's going well, you can learn from other states how they're doing, So it is a model that's set up here. I just wouldn't want to push the hand away when someone's coming to us, asking to work with us, right? It's,
Actually, on that topic, you said they're approaching us.
Hmm.
Can you describe who the us is? And that seems like a more like an unofficial. Can I hear more about that? Is that like, oh, there's four? Is it legislators? Are they reaching out to people at the Agency of Commerce Community Development? What's the status quo right now?
oh, sure. Well, I mean, the head of the Irish Senate came over last
Yeah,
year,
and-
met with the governor, met with the leadership in both chambers there and testifying in front of committee. So it really is coming from the Irish, the Dáil, the Oireachtas.
Right, and that's sort of, if you were to characterize what the outreach has been, the communication has been, that would be, it's not like or are there continued dialogue with the governor's office or something like, I'm just wondering what's going on now.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm the liaison. It's kind of a loose, I'd be chair of the Irish caucus for Vermont here. So they're in constant contact. The year before that, they sent the Lord Mayor of County Cavan over, if anybody was here last biennium. He came with his mayoral chain and everything. So they've really been making efforts to have outreach with some prominent figures coming over and visiting us in Vermont, which is, you don't always see the head of the Senate coming over to Montpelier here.
So I guess there's some clarity, like, and the individuals within the Irish government who are in touch there with their State Department, like what is the?
Yeah, so I met with the Minister of Trade over there. He was very excited about the potential.
Thank you.
Important question, would there be a Kerrygold versus Cabot smackdown?
It's
He's got right to.
I was in the store the other day, and what did I see in the frozen section? Guinness Cabot macaroni and cheese.
Oh, wow.
So look at that partnership. That's some heavyweights joining forces here.
And put that flow through commerce so that we could taste test it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really supportive of it, and especially like in the tech kind of space. I've like had a lot of time at conferences with Irish regulators, and like there's a lot of just like overlap and stuff that we're trying to do, which is great to have conversations when it comes to that. I am curious, like we've been editing the other elements of 122 as needed in our committee, and I'm just curious, like, would you be supportive if we needed to add like goals kind of outlined from your presentation? Would you be supportive of like sticking those in there?
Absolutely. You're looking at some of the legislation you've been working on, like Ireland's been working on some of this too. And that might be an example where if you have this relationship, someone from government's at your disposal to come testify. How do they do it in another country? I think we tap other states a lot, but we should have that worldview.
Question? Great.
I really appreciate it, folks. Thanks so much.
Great.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Yes, for flowers.
Good morning.
Morning.
Evening.
I am Rick Sagal, Office of Legislative Counsel, and I'm going to share. This is 1.5, which I'll email you. I know. I made one other change. Basically 1.4, and I'll tell you what the one change was that I made. So what this amendment reflects is yesterday's conversation, making a few changes, and I'll point out what's been changed since the last, I think 1.1 is what you saw yesterday. So it's been through a few iterations since you last saw it. I'm just going to go, Mr. Chair, through the yellow highlights, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the first change you'll notice is I ran this by Patrick Titterton, who ran it by Grady over at JFO. The issue was the previous language appropriated 200,000, which the budget has already done,
Right.
and they preferred it be worded this way. So the new language is of monies appropriated to Department of Economic Development in fiscal year 2026, 200,000 shall be allocated.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's just they were worried about double. I'm sure that would happen. But just out of an abundance of caution, make sure it's allocated, not appropriated. Same thing here. It's out of monies appropriated, 150,000 allocated Now, they did add the word grant, and I didn't have time to talk about why, but I think it's because this small business center, is not a government entity directly, so they're going to pay that center via grant. I'm okay with that language. If you are, it makes sense to me.
Whatever they say they need.
The money's already been appropriated, right? So we're just talking about how to make it work with two bills existing at the same time. No other changes to that one. We need to spend some time here on C. Same language has changed, saying that this is for the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Program, that out of monies appropriated, 25,000 shall be allocated to the program. And this is in addition, right? This program got other money allocated. But my concern, like I mentioned last time, is this is a pretty clear task given to this program with a due date, and the original allocation was 100,000 and it's been reduced to 25. So we may want to talk about that.
Be tracked it down.
Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to them and they are comfortable with it, the date and the 25,000, but they said they would at least be able to do the print annual guide. I think there was some concern about whether they'd be able to do the full AI platform for the website, that they're going to try to raise money to do it. But it may make sense to reduce the specifics of that project. Does that make sense?
So just the guide, no website or AI platform?
Well, I think leave it in there, it gives them the option of what
Yeah.
they can use it for.
I mean, I think my only concern would be that if we say this all will happen, do we say like to go towards this? You know what I mean?
Or an or instead of and.
Or an
That's what I
or.
was thinking.
Yeah, there we go, or an or. And then I think their goal is to do it all, but they're gonna need to raise out some extra funds. But she said they would at least be able to do the print guide, and that will actually, be of significant benefit.
I think so. I think this language is okay. This shall support the creation of. That to me seems okay,
Oh, yeah, support the creation of,
which is already existing language. My problem is the last sentence.
guide, website, manifest.
Why does it have to be, why are we saying it's gonna be completed by?
This was in the
Yeah.
Senate version.
Oh, I see. So we could
Yeah.
just take out
Let's
the
take
date.
that out.
Yeah.
So no date due by,
No.
and they can decide, if that 25,000 is enough for the guide and the website, that's fine. If they don't have enough for the platform, this doesn't make them,
Okay.
but that money has to be used for one of those three things.
Yep.
Right.
That makes
Okay.
sense. I know they'll be very comfortable with that.
Okay. All right. Well, that was easier than I thought it was going to be. Section 2, this is funny. That's not really funny. I mentioned last time it's the previous language was International Trade Division. Because I could find nothing about this International Business Office, but Grady looked it up in 2021. That this is the Montreal that you keep talking about that I don't know much about because I'm still fairly new here. But this is what this is for, and that is not apparently the International Trade Division. That is the International Business Office, but it's never been called that. This is more than you want to know. It kind of irks me that we're calling this thing. It's never been called this thing before, but the governor calls it that, and the budget in 2021 didn't call it that, but made that initial appropriation. Long story short, all I'm doing here is changing that allocation language and then updating it to be the International Business Office, not the International Trade Division. That is what the money is being allocated for.
Okay.
Does that mean that going forward, this will now be called the International Business Office? No, that's not what that is. Okay.
Maybe next year we can give it that name somehow. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to section 3. This
Keep sure of it being run
next year.
Wolf Maserati running
It
it.
is All right. Task force. This is the convention center. Last time we went over the addition of the flipping from the secretary of ACCD to the commissioner of economic development. That has not changed. I updated the names to be the correct Vermont RTCs and the Vermont, and I double checked that's correct. The other change I made is 6 times that the task force shall not meet more than 6 times. And ensuring that payment is not made for more than 6 meetings, reimbursement is not made for more than 6 meetings.
And just so everybody knows, I talked to the Chair of Appropriations. She asked me to touch base with JFO, which I did. I touched base with Patrick, and he in turn touched base with his people at JFO. He said he conferred with Emily and Scott and confirmed that this expense could be covered out of the legislative budget. They don't
Okay.
believe any additional language is required.
When Mike picks up the phone, I mean, people.
Yeah.
A lot of base.
People lined up to touch bases.
Yeah, that's right.
When I asked the question, no, Rick, you can't do that. This is ridiculous. Okay, so and is general fund the correct? That's the safest thing to do. Last I had an ACCD, but then we changed it to general fund. So
And they will, if that's not correct, they'll let appropriations know when it gets to appropriation.
okay, any questions about that section? The task force? Okay, section 4, Trade Commission, Vermont. I can come back to this at the end.
We've heard quite a bit. Need to know what the committee wants to do. Do you want to include it? And if you do you want to add more language to it, which I would suggest that someone take that task on to develop that language with Rick, and it'll be a floor amendment because I really want to get this voted this morning so we can get things moving. So first of all, do you want to include it? Everybody that wants to include it, raise your hand.
I'm apathetic. I mean, I'll kind of half raising my hand.
I feel really strongly that we don't include it until after we get the sister state report back. I think that we're working on 2 different paths, and I think the sister state program, I know Ireland wants this. I don't know that Vermont wants this, and I'm not sure why we would do something that another country wants before we make sure that it's what Vermont.
Is Taiwan in the sister state program?
No.
We
No,
have,
it's a program that and we don't have a law for Taiwan.
just
We have a
resolution.
relationship with them, so we can have a relationship with other countries without having a law for them.
I'm gonna switch and support you.
Yeah.
Let's wait for the.
As a person that's like 40+% Irish, I do feel a little uncomfortable, and it might just be because of, the things that I've heard about it. I think, and I don't know enough about the sister state program to really.
We don't either because.
Right.
Because they're
Still a
working, it's a
task force,
working group,
yeah.
it's a task force. We may get the report from them and realize we can't do that for the state and we want to do something like this instead. We
Right.
may realize that this fits perfectly in with that, and it makes sense to do it that way. And I would like to keep going on a path that we've set ourselves on and not change course in the middle before we get all the information back.
I hate redundancy. And if we're looking at a situation here where we have a program that not only would cover this, but sort of serve as a template for all the other international relationships we have, to me, that seems like a better path to go.
I certainly, I hear all of that. I definitely agree. I think I'm concerned about the timeliness and not wanting to rebuff an offer that's on the table from a country that we can definitely learn from and that we have already been in a relationship with. I can see, at least getting this through to strengthen our ties, and then as we develop our kind of international trade framework, adding this in.
I think we can do 2 things at once. I think that we do have a sister state relationship with Japan. Does that still exist? And
There
so,
is no official program yet. So any relationships that we have right now, there isn't a law that goes with it.
I think the sisters state with Japan is through executive. Yes.
that was the go, yeah, okay. So I think that I don't believe that the offer will go away from Ireland if we wait. But I also don't think that it frustrates the sister state committee. So I'm comfortable with it. I'm also not, I mean, I don't really see any challenge with doing both of those things at the same time. I would think that we'd need to add, I mean, I think Madam Vice Chair, the point about there being no goals language is a really important one. And so, and I agree that the presentation we heard today articulates them for maybe the first time in a concrete way. And that could be an adjustment that might at least clarify why we're doing what we're doing, apart from 17% fourth most, which aren't really reasons to engage in relationships with, international trade. So it appears, I don't see any downside to it. And I don't think it would frustrate anybody's ongoing efforts if we had it.
Okay. I think point that Vice Chair made is well taken, that we have a relationship with Taiwan. We don't have a trade commission with them. We also have, I think this is the third year that people will be going over to Ireland. We don't have a trade commission. So it hasn't hampered any of that, that exchange at all. And so I think I'm falling more on the side of let's wait, get the sister state in, see how that would work with this, and it's not changing anything that's happening right now. Because those relationships are already being made without having a formal trade commission statute.
The example we heard about Perigo was an interesting example, one that didn't necessarily make me think that, well, the solution would have been to have acted faster. It's I don't like the idea of it being framed around the prevention of loss, because that feels not, that doesn't seem like that's meeting goals that we'd like to sort of have be on the table. But I agree that if all we do is wait a year and what we have at the end of it is 4 years of ongoing momentum building, I can't imagine that sets anyone's teeth on edge.
I think you said before, but could you share again with Sister State? When is that? That
I
is your
believe the
9 months in.
report's due in December, so we'll
Okay.
have it for January, so we can
Yeah.
decide if that's something that we want to
Yeah,
read.
so there's no reason, I mean, I think that
So it's
makes
not a
sense.
long wait.
November 1st.
Say it again,
November 1st.
November 1.
That's a good argument for waiting, I think, is that we'll have that report.
Yeah, I confess I probably wasn't paying close enough attention to the sister state issue and its impact or its relationship with it. And now I know. I'm wondering if there's a way, instead of just saying, okay, we'll delete that section, whether there's some way to keep the issue sort of flagged so that we can review it when we get that report. Then you get the information, you get and you see what the whether it fits and whether it doesn't.
We'll all still be here,
I understand.
assuming it's January, and anybody can put in a short form bill with this language in it. I don't know if there's.
Hunter will put another bill in, I'm sure.
Well, maybe a way to walk the tightrope is to push the effective day out for a year. Then when we come back next year, sister state, if sister state works, and it should be part of sister state, that we just repeal this next year.
Like that? Okay.
Does that work for everyone?
So.
Spirit of compromise. If we need. I'm good with that.
Effective July 1, 2026.
That's fine.
But in that case, we don't need to amend the language of goals, et cetera.
Right, because, I mean, if we find that this is something that we want to happen, we can add the goals next year. Or it gets rolled into the sister state program.
Can we remove the portion about being able to collect funds?
Well,
I just,
they can't collect- they
it
can't-
feels really weird to me that we're setting up a statute with this, a vehicle, it
It won't
feels
happen.
weird.
It
It
won't
feels
happen.
really
Yeah.
weird. And I get that it won't happen, but I also know that once it's there, it's much more difficult to get rid of than,
Well, because we could get rid of the whole thing next year.
And also, I'm gonna just put this out there, right? Like, even if we do a sister state program, a lot of those things are sponsored by local businesses or, you know, kind of have a nonprofit kind of vibe to them. So they're gonna have to solicit funds.
Yeah.
To be able we're gonna have to be able to solicit funds to get any of these programs going.
So, because they're not taxpayer.
Because, right,
And it could be,
Yeah.
you know. I'm fine with it, and I think. I'd like to get. Moving on this too. We've got Laura's coming in at, I've asked her to come in now at 20 up. So I'd like to get this out of the way. You can take a short break and then take Laura. Okay.
Okay, so section 4 is the creation of the commission, which you're gonna keep, we'll push out the effective date. Section 5 is the appointment deadline, which I can just push to October 1, 2026.
Yep.
Your repeal, I'm gonna. You could have a repeal, never mind, that's gonna be complicated. I would,
The repeal is
Yeah.
where it is now, for now.
but I'll have it effective next year. Otherwise, it's gonna be awkward. Section 7, this is H34. That was literally copied and pasted. You all voted for that unanimously. I don't think you want me to go over it again. This is the workforce development. Okay. Scrolling down, this takes up several pages. Trust me, I didn't put anything in there. Section 8. Now, this is the baby bonds language. I am not Mr. Baby Bonds. It's Jonathan Gray. I can read you what he wrote. He is on the Senate floor for the Ed bill, I think.
You know, if the treasurer's office has looked at this,
This is basically what they sent him, and he made a few grammatical, our language changes to make it work. I don't know if they've seen it. I don't know if they have approved of it.
They agreed to it in a conversation. I'm sure they have not. We only got the language at 2 o'clock this morning, 3 o'clock this
Yeah.
morning. So John, I don't think slept last night. I feel horrible for
we
him.
will,
Yeah.
I think, we've already looked at language from the treasurer's office. Is this similar to what we've looked at? Or is it just
It is, and
constructed
it
differently?
is similar to what we looked at. It gives them more clear parameters and goals and otherwise incorporates all that, and they agreed to it verbally.
Okay,
And this is gonna go to Ways and Means and probably appropriations, and I think Chris Roop is working on a fiscal note to update, because there is a special fund created in this for their pilot program.
right, it's not through the
Not
state.
right, not
Right.
really by state job.
Right, it is, here, I'll show you. And yeah, administered by the Office of State Treasurer, consists of gifts, donations, and grants from any source, public or private, dedicated for deposit into the fund for the purposes of the baby bond pilot program. Yeah, there's no direct appropriation in there. So this, again, I can't speak to if this is.
Session law, just.
Yeah, there is the 8 and 9 are 10 is amending the baby bond statute that was, I think, passed last year. So current, this is it's 10, where are we? No, 3 VSA 609. Current law says the treasurer's duty to implement this chapter is contingent upon publication by the treasurer of an official statement that the treasurer has received donations designated for purposes of implementation or administration of the trust in an amount sufficient to operate a pilot program. Upon publication, the treasurer shall commence a pilot program implementing the trust pursuant to the provisions of the chapter. The pilot program shall be used to evaluate the impact, effectiveness, and operational necessities of a permanent program. So that part is being struck, replaced with contingent upon submission by the treasurer to the General Assembly in 2031 of the report summarizing baby bonds pilot program, and 2, an appropriation of funds by the General Assembly in an amount sufficient to fund the trust.
So is that getting struck because the treasurer has done all of those?
No,
prerequisite? No.
it was unclear and actually confusing as to when the program started. So this clarifies when the program starts. contingent to things that the treasurer publishes, but contingent to things that the treasurer provides, right? So it's just.
And appropriation, yeah.
And an appropriation.
And then you have, I mean, I don't know, it's up to you guys if you want to just trust this language. I just don't know enough about it. I'm sorry to speak to its correctness or what it does. I did read it. I talked to John briefly. And you know, he just said, let me know if you have questions or if they have questions. But you can see this is the creation of the pilot program, which I think John was saying they can do without you all telling them they can do it. But that's kind of, that was his question. Rep Grandin was like,
Yeah.
do they need this language? And I think he was,
In the end, they do need the language because the language in the baby bonds program requires them to set aside $3,200 per baby born. And the pilot program is supposed to be for middle school people for 5 years, which it won't be $3,200 and it won't be funded in a way that it's going to grow, but it will be held in a way that it will retain its value so that when they graduate from high school, they will have a similar experience. So the language was not good in the original to make this particular pilot program work. So it's disappointing that we had to put this in at the last minute and turns out we needed to do it.
so again, it's gonna go to Ways and Means, it's gonna go to the Senate, and
Ropes too.
yeah, if something's missing, hopefully John can correct it but hey,
Good word, yeah, I mean,
it's the end of the session, right? This is,
But it sounds like they do have outside funders who are willing to
Right.
put money into this program so that we can support some economically
disadvantage.
disadvantaged students and giving them some support when they graduate from high school. And I think that's an important piece. And then we can gain some information about how it really helps, or if it really helps and what the best way to set aside a program like this going forward could be for the state.
okay, so that's sections 8, 9, and 10. And then 11 are the effective dates, which, let me explain this. So 8, 9, and 10, I asked John, I suggested they take effect on passage. It sounds like they need this authority pretty quickly to work in this program, the Baby Bonds program. The Convention Center Task Force, I also have on passage because the first meeting is July 15th. I imagine maybe they can appoint people before July 15th. Sections 1 and 2, these are your appropriations, economic development. Those take effect July 1st, 2025. The Irish Trade Commission, we would need to change. So yeah, let's see. Does that make sense? And I think. So we're looking at draft 1.5 of this bill.
You need to run that through editing.
Now,
Any other questions? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to report favorably on S-122 amendment. Draft number 1.5.
Second.
Okay, moved by Representative Duke, seconded by Representative Harris Duncan. Further discussion.
This is happening, so no.
Oh.
just noticed a mistake.
Clerk can call the roll.
Representative Bush,
Yes.
Representative Booton,
Yes.
Representative Karis Duncan,
Yes.
Representative Cooper,
Yes.
Representative Duke,
Yes.
Representative Michellis,
Yes.
Representative Olson,
Yes.
Priestley, yes. Representative Floyd, is he online? No, okay. Representative Granny,
Yes.
Representative Marshall.
Zero.
Is that spelled differently?
It is.
It's a habit.
It's with big tears.
A couple A's.
It's like a little sick feeling in your stomach. Yeah.
Reporter who like, well,
You've not reported a billion.
I have not reported a bill. I can report it if you want me to.
40 billion. No. Oh.
We could change fame.
I'm not gonna change, but although I understand the bill and it would probably be a good bill for me to report, but I feel really. I really do feel conflicted about this. And a part of me does want to say no. Sorry.
I'm so sorry for it.
you
Oh, you're here.
get the clean copy and send it to Nigel so that they can move it right off to
Okay.
even before the floor will send it.
Great. So once you send it to me, Rick, I'll.
I'll copy you and I.
Okay, thank you. Oh, good.
With the vote that you're the recipient.
Is that a strike?
10-0,
Is it a strike already?
Yes, yeah.
You just let them know it's a strike all.
Okay,
That's one.
thank
thing.
you. The checklist will help.
Okay. All right. Representative Sibilia,
Yeah,
would you like to join us
it's so comforting to be back here, even after the worst time,
for all these years?
for all these years.
Good morning. I am here talking about an amendment to the Ways and Means Amendment of S-127. Yes,
Specifically the chip.
yes, yeah. And I'm here on behalf of Rural Caucus members, and I want to start, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair. I know you were sponsors of the amendment to the Ways and Means Amendment, and Rural Caucus members deeply appreciate the removal of the location criteria and the chipboard in terms of complexity. And so thank you very much for your work on that. There were a number of items that were challenging for various members of the Rural Caucus. It was important to us to kind of move the democratic process forward. We sent out a survey, seeing if there were some consistent challenges, and there were. And we drafted an amendment to your amendment to the amendment with those three items. It ends up being 5 instances of amendment. It is possible that there may be a 6th instance of amendment, but they will all be addressing the same 3 things. So the first instance of amendment is expanding improvements to include electricity infrastructure. In Vermont, we have 1 investor-owned utility. Then we have 2 rural electric co-ops, which have a different rate, pressures, different opportunities, and for funding or lack of funding, or FEMA versus no FEMA. And then we have a number of municipal utilities. So we do not have one type of utility throughout the state of Vermont. Last year, as part of the RES changes that we made, one of the things that was a key part of the consensus agreement among multiple stakeholders was we needed to do something to put downward pressure on rates. And so we removed group net metering. Doing that was challenging for a lot of our housers because the group net metering agreements
were used as part of the financing stack to building. But that is paid for by other ratepayers. So that was removed last year. And we have yet to come up with a resolution to addressing that. We do want our houses to be built efficiently and, optimally with renewables if it's feasible. We don't understand why we would not include electricity, and we would include broadband. I'm certainly an advocate for both. But also having had that happen last year, this seems like a pretty big opportunity to address a challenge with the folks building housing that has been identified. Secondly, we had in Rural Caucus this year, one of our members come forward to us and say, we really need to spend time thinking about what to do with buildings, empty buildings in our communities that exist now, and that with education reform may increase. And we've taken some testimony, heard from a number of different folks about what are successful projects look like. We've started to think about how do we deal with these buildings in our communities. So with regard to lowering the floor area threshold, it's really thinking about in small communities, we want to just make sure there's as much flexibility to reuse those buildings as possible. Thirdly, and this would be third, fourth, fifth, and if there is a sixth, it would include the sixth. We're not sure that we got every piece of the but for. It's removing the but for. We think that the housing crisis makes the case for the but for pretty clearly. There are other guardrails within the bill to provide opportunities to come back and check in. The cap still exists. The repeal of CHIP, I believe, still exists in here. So there are plenty of opportunities to come back and check in on us. And the but for in most of Vermont, really putting that forward, it makes us seem like we don't really understand what's happening on the ground. That's it, Mr. Chair. We're asking for your support. It was a democratic process. There were other things that Rural Caucus members had issue with. There are things that are not included here. There are some members of Rural Caucus who did not have issue with these three things, but we used a democratic process within to raise the biggest issues. And again, we are really grateful for the work that you all did on location criteria and the CHIP board. Any kind of reduction in complexity is helpful for rural Vermont. So thank you.
Question, how many members of Rural Caucus do you have and that you surveyed?
Our list goes out to, I think it's 50 plus.
Just approximately.
Yeah.
78.
So,
78.
Madam Co-Chair.
It's half the
That's more happening.
Hangers on.
Senate too, or just?
I think there's still like a couple.
Advisors.
It's only one or two.
We didn't get a chance to talk about this, and one of the things that we tried to address in the amendment is the floor space amendment and asking BEPC to come up with an understanding of how to make that work across the state, because this is, and to meet the housing crisis that we're in, we need many, many, many tools. And we need to focus on housing and not other things, right? And so that was a real struggle for us, right? So what is the minimum that the floor space would be, understanding that there will be some rehabilitation of buildings, some brand new construction, right? All different kinds of things, okay. So what we wanted is to set up a system where BEPC has the ability to say, this is maybe not BEPC, somebody has a way to say, this is meaningful housing for this community, and it might not meet that threshold, but it is meaningful housing, and that gets approved without encouraging development that isn't focused on housing across the whole state. So that's what we came up with in our amendment. This seems to reduce that number across the state to incentivize less housing to be built And I'm trying to understand that. I'm trying to square that.
So I think we are hoping to see as much flexibility as possible, given how significant the housing crisis is and how challenging it is going to be for us to address it. So that's, again, nothing in here is going to completely solve it, but
That's the same goal, different ways of going about.
I'm not sure that it is 100% the same goal, maybe. I think this guarantees that there's flexibility, consistent kind of flexibility throughout the state. So,
When the bill came to us, there were no guardrails. You could build one unit and you were good to go.
Yeah.
I think, at least for me, I think others in the committee that, as the vice chair just said, this is a bill, this is to create more primary residential housing. And, that's why we created the chip board. That the chip board would be the one to look at anything that was below the 60% that we had put in, because we understand there could be, we're modifying, taking over 12 schools, creating new housing there. There could be, they may not meet the 60%. And we, at the time, we didn't want to put that burden on the Betsy board to make those decisions. After I left here, the board kind of morphed and so. But
morphing, Mr. Chair.
but I think our goal still is that we want to make sure that this continues to be the primary goal is housing. If we went to 60, general housing went to 70, Ways and Means split it and went to 65. And so I understand why, but I think there's enough built into this that gives Betsy control over allowing CHIP to go through, and especially with the new people that we have that we put on the Betsy board for CHIP, that they can look at those projects, and if they fall below 65%, can still fund them. So I'm really cautious about 51%. Sure.
So we've seen this, a few times, and I think when we were taking a look at, what's going to help housing in Vermont, we've all had to, make little adjustments in our thinking. We voted out with 60%, right? And I supported that, even though in my mind, it might have a tendency to exclude certain kinds of housing. I'm just looking at the things that I think could be done with this program in my local community. Let's rebuild the general store, right? And on the second story, try to put some housing in there. And this would make it difficult. You got commercial on one, you got housing on the other. How are you going to fit that in? Maybe build an annex, I don't know, for more housing. But I understand.
Those types of things are being done now.
What time?
Those types of projects are being done now with the combination of VITA and VHFA and others.
That could be.
VITA. So, and this would be primarily for the infrastructure.
Right.
Whether there's new infrastructure that needs to be created or not. So
I'm just
wondering, that as an example.
Sure, but then I think, there's some of these projects that aren't online to do something like that with the other, agencies and stuff like that. I understand there's a tension. I really do. I understand there's a tension. I'm just trying to think of you know, how to make it feasible for some of the things that I think are pretty important. for the community.
Michael?
Well, I think Abby had her hand up first. If you want to go first.
Yeah, just very quickly, and I think I know the answer to this, which is that your amendment, when I read it, there's no adjustment to the purpose. The purpose section is staying the same.
That is the potential additional amendment.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And specifically around the but-for language.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
purpose.
because I saw that. It was just that one section was basically replacing it. Okay.
We've asked Ledge Council if that's meaningful. And
Got
to talk to the clerk
Right, because
about.
four was in the purpose. I get it. Okay.
Go ahead, you folks.
So, as everybody knows, I look at CHIP and TIF a little bit different. I think of the municipal side of this, and I'm gonna actually ask if it's possible if I could get VLCT's opinion on it. Even though they're not technically, no,
Just looking at the amendment, now I'm gonna take the testimony.
okay.
You can have that discussion offline if you like,
Okay.
but we're approaching noon. I know Laura has to go to housing, general and housing at noon.
Great, Tom.
So yeah, questions for Laura.
Yeah, so I appreciate the electric utility piece. I know that small projects in a rural area necessary. Would I like to see driveways in there? You know, some of these smaller projects aren't served by a public road. But I do appreciate the utility.
My understanding was the testimony was taken on Ways and Means, in which the auditor and the chief economist for the state had asserted that there were ways for the utility to just provide the electricity, just there was funds for that.
Mhm.
Do you have any knowledge of what they were referring to?
Yeah, so when utilities build out their infrastructure, that gets put into their rates. So
Issue a bill and they
the end, and you have different utilities with different, so we have one investor-owned utility, which has a different set of financial circumstances than the two rural electric cooperatives, which are working hard to upgrade and harden their infrastructure, which is also a lot being borne by ratepayers. And then we have a number of small utilities. And so there's not a monolith kind of answer here to all of this. And
I was simply unaware of there being funds available that utilities have to underwrite. I don't think I've heard of that. And I was wondering if maybe you'd heard of
I mean, I think they can. I also think they can bill back to the projects, which is adding to the cost of the project, so providing this as a opportunity, more flexibility.
Spirit. Laura, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for all your work on this and for the previous amendment. Again, that was really meaningful.
This as well.
We're gonna have a great bill.
In the end. Okay, so what I want to do is break for lunch. Back at 12:30. So we can have a final discussion, straw vote. So any questions? Can you get that to the clerk's office?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Okay, perfect. If we can go off.